Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today we are on to another video from my indoor gardening series. Now today is going to be a fun one. Today we're going to do our first harvest. We're going to transplant some plants, and we're going to show you what's growing in my indoor garden and talk a little bit about what you could grow indoors and how you can do it. So let's take a look at what needs to be harvested first and talk a little bit about how they've been grown. So the only thing that is ready to harvest right now are our radishes. You can see how huge they are. Behind the little tomato, there's another one back there. Now, these radishes are quite large, and they've been in this AeroGarden Harvest XL for 23 days. But I want to show you the amount of roots closely here so you can see what it looks like. That's the amount of roots that these have. These are sucking down water so fast that I'm needing to fill this AeroGarden, the reservoir, with water every 2 or 3 days. So I need to get these out of here so the little tomatoes can start to grow and flourish. So let's get you set up and see if we can show you this harvest. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull these radishes out, pull all the roots out. Pull them up and over my trellis. I think some of the roots actually got pulled off. We'll probably have to clean out this harvest a little bit later, and we'll do a video on how to clean out these harvests. But let's pull out some more of these roots. And there they are. The roots seem pretty healthy, and this is huge. We'll show you in a close-up shot how we're going to remove this little pod right here. Let's harvest this one. A lot more roots out of the unit. And then the last one. Now this one didn't seem to have as many roots, but it grew just as big. So now let's show you what they look like. As I said, these radishes have been in the AeroGarden. It's an AeroGarden harvest for 21 days. It's kind of hard to capture how long these roots are, but this is what was growing down in the container. Now they are getting a little bit brown, which means I do need to go in and clean out the roots of the tomatoes. And like I said, we'll do that on a different video. But the radishes look really good. What we're going to do is we're going to tear off all the roots. We pulled it right out of the basket. We'll clean that off, and we can actually reuse this basket. So we'll just get that really clean and sterile for the next time. And this is how the roots grow through the growing medium. This is called a sponge. It's an AeroGarden sponge. Looks like we did get some splitting, but that's going to be okay. And we just pull this off. And there we have an edible radish. Now radishes grow very, very quickly. So what I like to do is I like to use the radishes as an intermediary crop while I am growing other crops. So for example, the little tomatoes that I am growing in that same unit, and I'll show you those as soon as we finish cleaning these off. But those tomatoes don't get as big as quick. So the radishes took up the space, gave us a harvestable crop, and now the tomatoes will fill in. Now, as you can see, we've got some dots on these leaves. Now, if you look at it, they're pretty evenly spaced, and they're spaced the same width as the LED lights. I did not raise the LED lights soon enough, and these actually got burnt by the lights. So you do need to watch that your leaves are not touching the lights. Let's pull apart the next one. We did get splitting on this one also. And then the final one. Clean out that. Take the sponge off. And there we have the first harvest out of our AeroGardens. Now it's actually not the first harvest of the year for me. I've been harvesting my kale, chard, and chiji misai for a while now. These were started in September, along with a lot of plants that I planted outside that I'm growing outside, and I've just been harvesting these. Now we do have radishes in pots. This was an experiment to see which ones grew faster. The ones in my AeroGarden harvest grew the fastest, and I think that's because the lights stay on that unit for about 16 hours. These were under a light that was less bright. The lights here are turned off so that you don't get that weird striped effect that they cause. But these will be ready in a few weeks, I think. The radishes in my Devo will also be harvested in a little bit. The lights were set to turn off after 14 hours, and I don't think that was long enough. I've upped it to 16 hours, and we've actually started getting better growth since then. Now, to make sure we block the light from the inside of the unit, I did immediately put covers back over the holes where the radishes were harvested from. And here's my little tomatoes. They are growing really well. These are both orange hat tomatoes, and this unit can only actually handle 2 of those orange hat tomatoes. So now we're just going to leave those to get to their full size. In this unit over here, we also have tomatoes. Let's move that out of the way. But we have an ink spot. It has a little bit of a different growth habit than this other orange hat. So we're going to have several orange hats and an ink spot. I think I need to raise the lights on this. There we go. The lights are raised. It took 2 hands. But as I said, these 2 radishes are going to be harvested here shortly, and then the tomatoes will have room to grow. Now, I also actually have some basil in the back. The basil is doing really well. This is a green Genovese basil, because this unit's a little larger and can handle more plants. And then way back here, I don't know if you can see it. Let's move all the leaves out of the way. Way back here, we have a purple opal basil. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is going to involve some transplanting. I have some little tomato plants right here. These are tomato plants that are grown in soil, and we're going to continue to grow these in soil. We're just going to grow some of them, my micro-dwarf tomatoes, in gallon pots. And these are also supposed to be micro-dwarf tomatoes, but they turned out to be a bit larger. These were the AeroGarden's Golden Harvest tomatoes, and I think there was a batch of them where these turned out to be a lot larger. They're more of a dwarf size. They end up being about 3 feet tall. They are a small cherry tomato, but the flavor is excellent. They're a golden cherry tomato, and I absolutely love them. So what we're going to do is we're going to plant these in this 2.5 gallon pot. Maybe it's a 3. I'm not exactly sure. Nurseries change pot sizes all the time. But I think this is 2.5 to 3 gallon pot, and that's perfect for this size. Now, to transplant a plant from a small pot like this into a larger pot, so I use my tray. I do all my gardening indoors. It's snowing and below freezing outside right now, so I cannot do this outside. In my garage, it's pretty dim and pretty cold, so I do it in my grow room, which is a repurposed bedroom for when my son moved out of the house. This is where I grow all my plants. But to transplant, you do it the same way you would transplant any other vegetables. I always keep my tag, although I'm not going to forget what this is because I've grown it often enough. You just tip the plant out of the pot. Just squeeze it very gently. We've got some good roots growing here. Now, these have been growing in these pots the same amount of time as the plants have been growing in the AeroGarden and the Devo units, my hydroponic units. So this is 23 days worth of growth in soil. We're just going to dig a deep hole, try to contain the mess a little bit. Let's dig it deeper. Plant it the same depth it was planted in the smaller pot. Press the soil down, and then we'll water it in a little bit. This tomato is planted. Now, once this tomato is larger, I do have a trellising system that I'm going to use, and I'll show you that when it's time to start trellising. But we've got that planted. Let's plant the next one. We're going to grow 2 of the Golden Harvest. So we're going to dig a nice deep hole so that it can be planted the same depth as it was in the pot. This is a very nice, healthy plant. Get that planted in there. And this is the last time I'm going to need to transplant these plants. Now, one other thing that I do when I transplant plants is I fertilize them. And we're going to have another video all about fertilizer, but this has been a game changer. So the reason I love Osmocote is this has every nutrient that these plants will need for good growth and fruiting. And I only need to use a little bit. Just follow the directions on the container, on the pot, for the amount you need to put in your container. Just sprinkle it over the top, and every time I water this plant will receive a little bit of fertilizer. And this type of Osmocote is a coated fertilizer, so it releases slowly. So this will be good for about 3 months. I will not need to add more of this type of fertilizer until I take them outside. I actually do take these plants outside in pots and grow them on my deck once it's warm enough outside. And by that time, they're full grown and producing and do quite well. Now, the next tomatoes that we're going to transplant are my micro dwarf tomatoes. So the first one that I'm going to transplant is this little ink spot. Now, I do have to say that the ink spot in my Devo unit is doing better than this one is. Now, this one has not had a ton of fertilizer yet. That's probably part of the issue. My hydroponic units I've been fertilizing regularly since the plants started to grow. Now, I will be doing a separate video on fertilizer, so we'll cover exactly what I do besides the Osmocote to fertilize my plants. So we're going to put the tag in there. I actually grew 2 of these just to make sure I'd have at least one. I'm only going to grow 1 ink spot and 2 more of the orange hat. So let's pull this out. We don't have as many roots on this one as we did on the Golden Harvest. So there we have an ink spot transplanted. Now let's do our orange hats. Now, I actually did change my mind a little bit. Since we've got 3 orange hats growing in the hydroponic units and only 1 ink spot, I think we're going to do 2 ink spots and 1 orange hat in the pots. So now that we've got everything tidied up a little bit, and we've got the transplanting done, and we've got our radishes harvested, let's show you what's going on in the rest of my grow room. So here's an overview of my grow room. This is just a bedroom, a spare bedroom from when my son moved out. Brought in racks and lights, fans, everything you need to grow vegetables. So up here I have my 1 lone tomato that's left that I'm going to gift. We've got other plants in here that are starting to grow. These are my seedlings. This right here, most of these are not going to be used. They're just an experiment growing between my regular seedling setup and this unit I received from GrowFriend. It's got its own internal lights. It's got its own heating mat. Everything's on a heating mat under here. And we've got seedlings growing. Now, I'm just trying to compare the lights for this unit with the regular lights that I use. Seed germination was exactly the same. You can see that they are all stretched just like the other ones. They don't like to be under the humidity dome that long. I should have transplanted them out, but I have enough basil and I have enough peppers already. What we're waiting for is my dwarf tomatoes to germinate, and they have not germinated. They haven't germinated in my GrowFriend tray, and they have not germinated in my regular seed starting setup. So what I'm assuming is the seeds were old and just not good anymore. So I actually ordered some more Adelaide Festival, and we're going to try this again. We've got my lettuce that's germinated. This is how I like to grow my cutting lettuce for salads indoors. I usually get about 4 or 5 cuttings from this kind of setup. Once I've done 3 cuttings on a setup like this, I will do another one. I'll just set up another one and get it growing to replace the one that is going to be finished. So I'd say we've got probably another couple of weeks, and then we're going to be able to start cutting on the lettuce. I released a medlar harvesting video in my previous video. This is where I am blooding my medlars, and if you're wondering what that means, I'll link a video up above. And then we have my citrus. My citrus need a lot of lights, so I have them under this Devo light unit. We've got some Sensei lights all the way around it, and that's been enough to help these citrus trees thrive. This is a mandarin orange. This is 3 years old. It has not produced any fruit until this year. We've got a little baby fruit right there. And then we've got one more down there. So we've got 2 fruits trying to set. I'm hoping they do not drop. Sometimes citrus, if they're too young and not strong enough, they will drop their fruit. But this is my improved Meyer lemon, and it's produced fruit for me for the last 3 years, and it's still continuing to produce fruit, and we're going to have a ton of fruit unless these drop. There's going to be no reason for the fruit to drop on this tree unless it suffers some sort of stressor, like I either water it too much or too little. And we'll do another video on citrus care. But in the meantime, I will link a video that I did a couple of years ago on what I learned about growing citrus indoors. And these do go outdoors during the summer. And to not bring in bugs, I do a very thorough washing of the entire plant before I bring them indoors. We've got a banana in the back. This is an experiment. It was a gifted banana. I had not really had the desire to grow bananas indoors. It's a dwarf Cavendish, which should probably get about 6 feet tall. And hopefully it'll fruit. It's looking very healthy back there. I had it indoors last winter. It grew double this height, but when I took it outside, it completely died to the ground. And this is a new pup from that plant. So we're just going to possibly try and leave it indoors all year round. This is where I'm going to be growing my taller tomato plants, my pepper plants, and we've got some cucumbers. They're called parthenogenic cucumbers, which means they don't need pollinators. Then we've got some sugar pod peas, and they will be growing on the netting in the back here. Now, I grew cucumbers last year and they did beautifully, so I have no doubt that they will do well again this year. Sugar snap peas, I've only grown them for the greens, but my daughter's been growing them indoors in a very tiny grow rack system and has been harvesting peas for weeks. So we're going to try and harvest these for peas. This is my ginger plant. I've grown them for 3 years, and this is the first year with actual success. You can see how wide the clumps have grown. And I actually needed ginger last night, dug down and harvested ginger. They were the baby gingers, and I probably shouldn't have done that because this is a small plant. But I was able to harvest ginger and use it in my cooking. And that was like a pivotal moment for me. It made me so happy. I loved it. Got another citrus back here that's fruiting. This is an Australian blood lime. It just finished its 2nd bloom. And I don't know if any of those set fruit. I did not haul it out to hand pollinate the flowers, and because of that, I'm not expecting to see much more fruit than is already on there. This right here is a seedling feijoa, or pineapple guava, that was gifted to me, and I'm trying to decide if I'm going to plant this outside. From what I've heard, if they're not protected like my fig trees over the winter, they will die. I live in Utah zone 6/7, and they're just not quite hardy enough for our harsher winters. But it's my favorite fruit. I grew those in Southern California, so it might be worth it, just like my figs are worth it. This is a very interesting plant. It's a Vicks plant. It smells exactly like Vicks Vapor Rub and just as strong. And somebody gifted me a cutting of these, and they grow wild. I have to cut it back every probably 4 weeks. Otherwise, it gets completely out of control. But it's a succulent, and it gets watered once a week. We've got some succulents here. The lights on this side died. I need to get some replacement bulbs, so I moved them up here. I love growing succulents. This is what's left over of my propagation attempts. Succulents are so easy to propagate, and I've had so much success that I've had to stop propagating them because I don't have room in my grow room for everything that I've been growing. I've got more succulents up here. They can end up being quite an addiction, but I have run out of room and decided I need room for food rather than succulents. So as I said, I've stopped collecting and stopped propagating. This is where we're going to grow my micro dwarf tomatoes. These are the ones that we just potted up. This is a roselle plant that will be moved down under a taller grow light in a little while. What I do with my roselle plants is I propagate them by cuttings, and I also grow them by seed. This plant was started by seed last year. It actually fruited outdoors this year. And then in September, I took a cutting, and you can see the new growth. So this is going to be my next year's plant. We've got cat grass started right there for my kitty. These are perpetual onions that I dug out of my garden and planted in a pot so we could have green onions. This has not sprouted yet, but this is catmint. These are going to be my soil-grown basil plants. We've got my radishes. And then we've got some dill started for our salads. And then down here we have Chiji Misai, which is a Komatsuna and Tatsoi hybrid. We've got 2 varieties of Swiss chard and one that my cat decided he wanted to eat, which was terrible. He got in here and started to eat it. So we'll see if that one grows. And then we've got 3 varieties of kale. We've got some curly kale and whatever large leaf kale this is. This was in a mixed package of kale. I've got my only 2 houseplants. I'm not really a houseplant person, but these were gifts. And they seem to do well in this dark corner. You know, I've wondered if I should give them more light, but they just keep going. As does my aloe vera. My aloe vera seems to absolutely love this dim corner. I've tried putting it under brighter lights and putting it in full sun outdoors, and it just burns to a crisp. Now that I've learned to give it shade when it's outdoors and a dim corner in the house, it does beautifully. So this will probably, on the next warm day, I will probably need to divide this again. So I don't know what we're going to do with the large portion of it, but we're going to divide it and start some of those babies. So I hope you've enjoyed this overview of what I'm growing indoors, and I would love to hear what you're growing indoors. It is so much fun to be able to have things to harvest, and it gives me the light that I need over the winter so I don't delve into a deep, dark depression because I can't be outside. So it's beneficial in many different ways, and I would love to hear what you're growing. Even if you don't have a large grow room, even if you're just growing something on a countertop somewhere, I would love to hear about it. So hopefully this video has been helpful. If it has been helpful, I hope you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and go have a wonderful garden adventure.